So I would just add there'll be plenty of opportunities to take action on this bill after it's been introduced. I think it would be premature at this point to be raising it in congressional meetings. I think that you want to stay focused on the 4 asks that we've provided to you, because those are things which are a member of Congress can take immediate action on. So don't worry. Don't worry. Great. Okay. We're delighted to be with you here today, and we're going to have, you all are going to have some exciting meetings. I think you've got a very good presentation from Soapbox and Ashley on logistics, and Abram and I are going to do the same on legislation. So next slide, please. Those of you who were able to participate in our advocacy webinar on Tuesday heard members of Congress say the most important thing about having a good meeting is to have a very specific ask. And so that is what we have prepared for you, our asks that members of Congress already know about and already understand and are prepared to take action on. So what we're looking for in these meetings is something where a member of Congress can go out and take action pretty quickly. And so there may be other bills that that have come out or of interest, but we ask that you stay focused on these because that's where you can be most impactful. So everyone knows that our ALS Disability Insurance Access Act is one of our priorities. We want members of Congress to co-sponsor and pass this bill. Earlier today, Abram and I had a very exciting conversation with the Senator's office, who indicated it was one of their top priorities and gave us some background information on how hard this bill is being pushed. And they were very optimistic on the fact that we can get it pushed this time. There has never been a more important time to do it with COVID and family members out of work. The time for you all to be able to get Medicare and to get your disability insurance check is right now. And so we hope that you will make that your priority focus in terms of the first ask. We've also heard this is an issue that's impacting people right now, immediately, about how can they get home infusion of IV medication. So if you're someone who has private insurance, you haven't had any problem in terms of getting your medication, your Radicava, through a home infusion. However, if you're on Medicare, you have had difficulty because it's only covered at home through Medicare Part D, the drug benefit, and you would have to pay out of pocket for it to be delivered to you at home. And certainly nobody wants to go to the hospital or a doctor's office. So that's something that's impacting people's lives right now in terms of being able to get medication. on the DoD ALS research program. You'll hear more about that later. I can tell you that we've been in touch with that office. They're very excited that they've gotten many, many applications for the new funding that we were able to win last year, and we really want to double that from $20 to $48 million this year. I think Ken gave you a very good overview of the ALS registry and biorepository. We're asking for $10 million to support research for treatment, cures, and research to prevent the disease. Next slide.
All right, thank you. And so, as Kathleen mentioned, one of our top priorities this year, and for really the past three Congresses, has been to waive the 5-month waiting period before people with ALS get access to Social Security disability insurance. And over the course of the COVID pandemic, we've been pushing really hard amongst the leadership on both the House and the Senate side and all of the co-sponsors to really emphasize the importance now of how expensive ALS was and to have to be diagnosed with this disease even before the pandemic. So now it's especially important that we get access to these benefits as soon as possible to help both economically and just get access to all the other benefits and joy once they do. And so our number one ask this year is going to be asking members of Congress that have not yet co-sponsored the ALS Disability Insurance Access Act to do so. And given the pandemic, it makes it even more urgent. But for co-sponsors, we're also asking them to encourage their counterparts in leadership and across both chambers to support including the bill in any kind of future COVID legislation. So to date, there have been probably about 4 different bills that Congress has passed, expanding access to things like telehealth and providing more protective equipment, among a whole host of other issues. And we want this to be included in any kind of COVID legislation. So when you're all up and having conversations, and rest assured that all of these talking points are also in your script, the real points that we want to make in terms of actually advocating for this bill is that ALS is unique. So there is no known cause. It takes an average of about a year to actually diagnose somebody with ALS. The last thing that physicians actually want to do because it is a death sentence. And also because it's just so hard to discover. It's really something that you figure out by ruling out all other possibilities. And then, of course, the average lifespan is 3 to 5 years. And Congress has recognized this in the past. So there's very strong precedent for waiving the 5-month waiting period for SSDI because Congress actually waived the 24-month waiting period for Medicare benefits for people diagnosed with ALS back in 2000. And so when you're thinking about the cost of benefit, Medicare is where the real money is at. So SSDI is really important, but it's only a few $100s a month in a lot of cases. It's Medicare where the real issue, where the real money is. So this isn't a difficult ask. It shouldn't be a difficult ask. And there's urgent need. So people with ALS, as many of you know who have the disease, eventually you lose mobility and you'll probably lose your employment and employer-sponsored health insurance. And so that only increases the need to have access to SSDI benefits and family access to Medicare. And this is an argument that's worked really well so far. So I mentioned that we've been advocating for this bill for 3 Congresses now. We've never seen this much support, and it's a testament both to all of your efforts and the kind of situation that we're in that's really raising ALS as a priority for folks in Congress. And so currently, many of you have probably participated in our webinar earlier on Tuesday. We had 3 members of Congress come and speak. Senator Braun came and spoke, and he noted that while we have 61 co-sponsors, which is incredible, there are another probably 10 that have not co-sponsored the bill that have basically told them that they'll be part of the whip count, which are going to support it when there's actually a vote. And so that's a filibuster proof. And so if we can get a regular vote on this, be a regular order, it's going to pass. And so right now the strategy is to figure out, number one, if we can do it the easy way and bring it up for a unanimous consent vote, which is just when they bring the bill to the floor and then nobody objects and it passes. And if that doesn't work, then bring it through regular order to get a vote on the House floor, or on the Senate floor. So, Kathleen, do you have anything to add?
No.
Great.
Next slide, please.
Next slide.
infusion, we talked a little bit about this before. So this is Congress. Congress needs to fix this. And so your message for all members, and they've done this so much for COVID. They've expanded so many other things. Abram mentioned telehealth, and that's really been key. And they've expanded other healthcare services at home. But home infusion is not covered for people who have Medicare, which just doesn't make good sense. So what we're looking for is full coverage for home infusion for people with ALS who require Radicava, the IV medication. And by that we mean the drug, the pharmacy support, and the nursing care. So all of those components are critically important. I mentioned that private insurance and the Veterans Administration fully cover home infusion for IV medication. And that's really important. So people who have that insurance coverage are able to get what they need. If their doctor prescribes it for them and thinks it's the right thing for them, they're able to get it. And this is really important. We want to establish this for all medication because we don't know what's coming down the pipe, but we want to be sure that if you need to get the medication at home and it needs to be home infused, that you can get it. Under Medicare Part B, some people are able to get certain medications covered, but it doesn't include our medication. And so under Medicare Part B, if you require Radicava for ALS, you can only get it at a physician's office or an outpatient hospital setting or an infusion center. And no one really wants to go to those settings to get their medication. So many people have said, we just can't do it. Under Medicare Part D, you are able to get your medication, your Radicava for ALS, but you have to pay out of pocket for pharmacy and nursing services. And this is actually something that Stephen Winthrop brought to our attention. He was able to get his Radicava at home, but he had to pay out of pocket for this. So we began to realize that was a significant problem. So clearly, it shouldn't matter what kind of insurance you have. You should be able to get home infusion for your medication just like everybody else. And Congress needs to come up with a solution and to fix this problem. And it's critically important that it happen right now because during the COVID crisis, and this is going to be with us, it looks like, for a while, we don't want people to have to go without their medication or to have to pay out of pocket for it because there's so many other costs that need to be paid for. Next slide, please.
Great. So one of our number one appropriations priorities is to boost funding for the ALS research program at the Department of Defense. And we're asking all members of Congress to support $40 million for this program. Last year, we were instrumental in securing $20 million for the program, which is a doubling over the funding for the previous year. And so way back in 2007 and 2018, we worked very closely with the Department of Defense to identify opportunities for growth. And looking at the portfolio that they fund, we quickly noticed that it funds primarily preclinical, so that really early stage biology research. And given its focus on really the high risk, high reward sort of research, we saw a real opportunity for growth here. And so all of this combined has created this new re-energized effort to increase funding for the program. And it's a really relevant program that we're able to make a really great ask for because ALS is connected to military service. So as many of you know, people with ALS who have served in the military are up to twice as likely to be diagnosed with ALS. And that establishment of that was actually in the early 2000s, and the ALS Association fought for the Department of Veterans Affairs to recognize ALS as a service-connected disability, which has opened a lot of benefits, including home infusion that Kathleen mentioned earlier. And so this is really a unique program because it's peer-reviewed. So it has a panel of both people with ALS, researchers in other agencies across the federal government, and the like. And it's able to accomplish a mission that's unique because it's complementary, not duplicative of the rest of the research that's being funded both in the private sector and by other federal agencies. And one of the most important things is that every dollar that goes to the DoD LSRP is dedicated exclusively to researching ALS. other agencies, sort of like NIH or CDC, in other cases, especially NIH, they fund research that's site-specific, and so it's not disease-specific. So they focus on the brain, and if it even remotely helps move forward the ball on ALS, they kind of code it to ALS, and it shows up as a categorical funding that you can actually look up on the website for NIH. But DoD is focused solely on the ALS, and so it's really unique, and that's why it's so important to us. Like I mentioned, we're asking for this increase so that we can expand the focus of the program. Currently, it's still focused on preclinical research, and based on our discussions with the Department of Defense, it would take at least $5 million per clinical trial for them to expand out of preclinical into early phase clinical trials. And so we are asking for $40 million this year so that they can continue to use the $20 million that they're currently receiving to fully fund preclinical research, but also use an additional $20 to support early stage clinical trials.
Amber, I could add just one thing. The association, of course, is very supportive of funding for NIH. We have been instrumental in boosting that funding, and we're just we work very closely with NIH on a lot of issues. But as Abram pointed out, this money is specifically earmarked for ALS, and that's why it's so important. But NIH does a lot of terrific work in this area, and we very much support their efforts.
Absolutely. Next slide. So Ken did a fantastic job really overviewing the importance of the National ALS Registry at the CDC earlier, and so we're asking for continued funding at $10 million, and it's been at $10 million for a few years now, to really continue its work. So the important things to know about the registry are that it actually funds its own research. A lot of people aren't aware of that, into identifying what actually causes ALS. And so if there's any agency out there that's going to discover what actually causes ALS, it's going to be the registry. There's nobody else doing that same level of work. Also, the biorepository collects biased specimens from people with ALS, so researchers can better understand how the disease works, its potential to discover biomarkers, how the disease progresses, and match the causes. So if there's anything you want to take from the registry, it's going to be the one that identifies what causes it. It also connects people with clinical trials. And so if you've not already, we definitely encourage you to register for the registry so that you can receive notifications about clinical trials and if you're eligible. And so it's a really helpful resource for you all. It's also the largest ALS database that aids researchers in finding cures and treatments. Kathleen?
One thing I wanted to add on this, and I think that Ken mentioned it, but I just want to reinforce it. Collecting history from people living with ALS, and particularly biological samples, really is going to help researchers identify risk factors and prevent ALS, and that's really it's one of the best resources for that kind of information that any researcher can come in and ask for that. So that means small researchers who may not have a great deal of resources, who are sometimes the ones that are very creative and searching for treatments and a cure. So that's another reason why it's so important. Next slide, please. Okay, Morgan, we're open.
Yeah, we're going to turn it over to Morgan really quickly, but just want to quickly, before she takes over, reemphasize that you have on your Soapbox app access to all of the documents on the issue versus that overview, every single one of these issues, and then the script itself to actually help walk you through the points that we just made, and then, of course, anything else that you want to add. So go ahead and take it over, Morgan.
With his staff, they've been really wonderful, I think. And we're pretty excited about the bill. We're going through some edits. I think they want to make a few more refinements. That was the last email I saw. So we don't quite know what the final version is going to be, or at least the version that they're going to introduce. But so far, everything we've seen looks positive, and we really appreciate what Senator Braun is doing and what his team is doing and how they're making time for us and talking this through with us.
Absolutely, and we had a chance to talk with, our public policy committee really guides our efforts, and Ken Maycap is our chair. We've had a chance over a period of time to talk with Ken and Chris, our vice chair, about the legislation, and based on what our careful analysis and the work that's been done on the bill, we will be supporting the bill, and it will be introduced next Tuesday. And we'll be pleased to continue to working with the senator. Every bill, when it's introduced, is a work in progress. And I'd have to say, Abram and I did spend an hour, along with Jill from our research team this morning, with the senator's staff, and they have consulted with the FDA. You've done extensive consulting with us.
Yep.
They've talked to other ALS groups. They have really done their homework. They've read every single piece of information they can get from the current FDA, the 4 pathways that are available, and they put a lot of thought to it, a lot of commitment. So we're pleased to continue working with them on this legislation, and we'll be supportive of it when it's introduced. It will create a new pathway for an opportunity for the drug to be made available on a conditional approval basis. That can be able to garner real-world experience, and we think it offers a lot of great promise. Abel or Neil, do you want to add additional?
Well, let me
just
there. I need you to dive back a little bit, because there are some members of our audience that are telling me they're not familiar with the bond legislation. So let's pause and a quick synopsis of what that bill is, and then please proceed, Abram.
Yeah, absolutely. And so the Promising Pathways Act, which has been in the news lately, is actually a later iteration of the bill that was introduced at the beginning of the year, or late last year, called the Conditional Approval Act. And the Conditional Approval Act creates a new pathway for approval of new drugs, and it is theoretically able to provide access to drugs that are still in the experimental phase and in phase 3 to patients that need it. And throughout the process, we've worked on probably 3 or 4 really heavy comment rounds on trying to improve the bill, make it more viable. And really, our goal throughout this has been guided by our principles for clinical trials and making sure that any sort of policy that seeks to expand access to experimental therapies, it doesn't slow down ultimate approval, and that it makes sure that the resources aren't taken away from ultimate approval, but also striking a balance, a really unique balance between safety, efficacy, and speed. So I don't know if Kathleen, you have anything else to add to the specifics of the bill, or Neil. It is an iterative process, if anything, so it's been introduced before. An updated version will be introduced probably next Tuesday. We're working with them to get some final changes in that we think will help bolster it a bit more, and then we'll move from there as it goes through the committee process. It'll gain more changes, and as we seek to identify additional sponsors, both in Congress and amongst the patient advocacy community, because they're really important. It isn't just going to impact ALS, it's going to impact a whole lot of other diseases, and we need to make sure that we're being fair across the board.
That's great. The other thing I would add, Abram, is that the FDA has 4 other pathways, and this is creating a 5th. So there will be plenty of options for pharmaceutical companies to choose which way they want to go through the approval process. And this has a new and innovative 5th pathway. And we'll be getting more information out on the bill. As I said, it hasn't been introduced yet. And when it's introduced, we'll have a section-by-section summary, go into great detail.
Yep.
But it's so far
it'll be an iterative process. So hang with us. We're working through this without this as much as anybody else. And so we will support legislation that speeds access to drugs and ultimately speeds up approval of new therapy.
Okay, thanks. I have one more question specific to this bill. And apparently Senator Braun recently members? Is there a way to find out who they are in case any of our ALS advocates happen to have an audience with them?
Yeah, so Senator Braun is actually pushing the ALS Disability Insurance Access Act, so our bill, and that's correct. So we have 61 co-sponsors, and he mentioned roughly 10 others that aren't co-sponsors, but that would support its passage, which makes it filibuster-proof, which means that they can't hold it up if it goes through regular order. But that's a confidential and private whip count, and so while we're aware of a few members, that's something that we don't necessarily have access to either. It's something that they work behind the scenes to achieve.
And is there a version of Senator Braun's bill?
I'm sorry?
Is there a House version of Senator Braun's bill?
We're not aware of one at this point. With the first version of the Conditional Approval Act, there was a House version, and so we'll be looking for that as well, but it's Senator Braun's office who's taking the lead on this. And, I think the other couple of members that were on the bill to this point may have been Sally Murkowski.
Well, I would just add there'll be plenty of opportunities to take action on this bill after it's been introduced. I think it would be premature at this point to be raising it in congressional meetings. I think that you want to stay focused on the 4 asks that we've provided to you, because those are things which are a member of Congress can take immediate action on. So don't worry.
Providing support for this bill, but we do have to wait till it's been introduced and there are specific decision points that we can influence, and that's what we'll be doing.
Okay. And for clarity, is there an actual piece of legislation around home infusion, or is this an awareness point that we want our advocates to raise in meetings?
Yes. At this point, the National Home Infusion Association is working with us and others to get a bill together. They have a draft bill. It hasn't been shared. Again, it's in developmental stages. But we think it's much closer to having an agreement made on it. So we do want to. One of the things that's so important is that people can tell their personal stories. So it's important that people raise it in terms of sort of saying, hey, I really like to get my home infusion. I don't understand why I'm being discriminated against because I'm on Medicare. I should be able to get it just like private insurance and VA insurance. So it's a very concrete, arguable issue that can talk about that's relevant right now to COVID. Members of Congress are very anxious to do whatever they can in COVID. Matter of fact, on the House and Senate floor, basically they've been told, don't bring up anything unless it's COVID. So you're much better off sticking to things that you can relate to COVID. And on the ALS DoD research, again, that's a really strong point. As you probably know, the association is very concerned about any delayed research.